right? It's worth the wait.
So you're not going, you don't go on the east side, you go on.
I just want.
Okay.
Seems like I've made the right choice in that.
Well, it was working on Thursday, because I was on the east side to talk to staff, and now it didn't work tonight. Thank you, Melanie. I can't even turn on my TV.
All right, thank you. Good evening, good evening, everyone. It is about 7:10 p.m. in Hermosa Beach, California. I hereby call to order and welcome you to our November Planning Commission meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by our Commissioner Flaherty.
Thank you. Place your hand over your heart and say after me, facing the flag, on the wrong side of the building here. It is. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What happened there?
Someone put the flag on the left side.
All right, thank you, sir. If we could now have the roll call.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Here.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Here.
Vice Chair Hirsch, or Commissioner Zahn. I'm so sorry. Commissioner Zahn,
Not here.
Not here.
absent. Vice Chair Hirsch, absent. And Chair Peterson.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do have a quorum. I'll note that Commissioner Zant will not be here this evening. Vice Chair Hirsch is in transit. We expect her here momentarily. Our next item, item 4, approval of the agenda. This is the time for the Planning Commission to discuss any changes to the order of agenda items. Do we have any thoughts? No?
I'm good with it.
All right. I will also note that we're having some slight glitches with our electronic voting, so we will be doing voice votes tonight. So do we need a motion on approving the agenda? I believe we do. May I have one?
Move to approve?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Chair Peterson,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 5, this is public comment, general public comment. This is the time for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items within the Commission's jurisdiction and items where public comment will not be taken. The public is invited to attend and provide public comment. Public comments for this portion are limited to 2 minutes per speaker and will only be taken from those present in the council chambers. No remote public comment will be taken during this time unless required by the Brown Act. A total of 30 minutes will be allocated to this initial public participation item. No action may be taken on matters raised during public comment except the Planning Commission may take action to schedule issues raised during public comment for a future agenda. Speakers with comments regarding city management or departmental operations are encouraged to submit those comments directly to the Community Development Director or City Manager's office. Despite all those words, I will still add that we do have public hearings on specific items tonight. So if you're here to speak on a specific item, we do have space for that. This is general public comment. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak now? Seeing none. All right, we will close public comment. I will note that there was one letter that was submitted. Do we wish to comment on that now or not? I'll just note that we did receive a written communication from Mr. Anthony Higgins specific to the Community Development Director's reports.
Sure. So, Chair, I did see Mr. Higgins' letter. Typically, for those types of community development director reports, since it's not an action item, the time for public comment would be during the general public comment. That being said, if the will of the Planning Commission is to solicit public comment during that item, I am not going to stand in the way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, no other items on public comment? We will move on to item 6, which is our consent calendar. Everything on the consent calendar can be acted on with a single motion and vote. And as it so happens, there's one item on there, which is the action minutes from our last meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar, or if someone wishes to pull it and discuss, make revisions, et cetera, feel free.
Move to approve?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar, which consists of our action minutes of our last meeting. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty.
Yes.
Chair Peterson.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
All right. Now moving on to item 7 or section 7, public hearings. We have 3 scheduled for tonight. The first is the triennial report for on-sale alcoholic beverage conditional use permits. Do we have a staff report on that?
Good evening, Chair. Jake Whitney, Associate Planner, will provide that staff presentation for you.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Jake Whitney. Staff has prepared the latest version of the triennial report for the 6-month period covering March 1st, 2024 through August 31st, 2024. As is the city's established practice, the triennial report is presented to the Planning Commission over the course of 2 meetings. The first meeting presents the report as an informational item, which occurred at the last Planning Commission meeting, while the second meeting is conducted as a public hearing. Tonight, staff is conducting the public hearing portion of the report. The data provided in the report does not change between the 2 meetings. The next report will be presented in February of 2025, which shall constitute the reporting period between July 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024. The report consists of data provided by the Hermosa Beach Police Department in conjunction with State ABC, as well as the Hermosa Beach Code Enforcement Unit and Los Angeles County Fire. This data aids staff and the Planning Commission to identify potential violations to conditional use permits by on-sale alcoholic beverage serving establishments. If an on-sale alcoholic beverage serving establishment hits the threshold of incidents established by the city to initiate a CUP review, the Planning Commission may initiate said review of a conditional use permit at its discretion based on the facts of each case. Based on the report, the data provided in the report on this cycle, no establishments have met the threshold for potential CUP review, and therefore staff is not recommending that any action be taken against any CUP holding alcohol serving establishment at this time. That concludes staff's presentation. We're available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Do any commissioners have questions of staff at this time?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none. Has anyone phoned in? We do take Zoom comments on this, correct?
Yes, Chair, we do.
Of the attendees, none have their hands raised.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll say last call. If you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand electronically. Any takers? No? Okay. At this point, I'll close the public hearing on this. the motion would be to, receive and file, I guess, the report. Unless there are any other questions, comments from my peers. Can I get a motion?
Well, I would make
Or
a
did you-
comment as we do that, for
Yeah, yeah.
those who may be unfamiliar, even though we do this on a recurring basis. But I would note that this covered the period of the summer months, which typically are the most impactful, if you will, in the city. And yet during that entire span, there were no police reports of violation as noted. There were no citations issued by community development. There were a number of incidents that people sometimes respond to, but that quite frankly have virtually nothing to do with the commission or the conditions that are imposed by the CUP. So I think this is, again, I don't know how many consecutive periods now we've reviewed these without an incident. And so my motion would be simply to receive and file.
All right, we have a motion to receive and file. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes?
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Chair Peterson,
Yes.
motion carries 3-0.
All right, thank you. At this point, we would move on to item 7B. I will note that we have a colleague that is just walking in the door. Wow, that's amazing. Welcome. We value her input, so I was going to stall or call a break, but I will give her a moment. We can start when you're ready. Okay, if the record will note that Vice Chair Hirsch is here for the beginning of item 7B, which is a request to approve a conditional use permit and precise development plan to allow a new physical recovery studio at 301 Pier Avenue. Is there a staff report?
Chair, Associate Planner Jake Whitney will also have this presentation for you this
All
evening.
right. Thank you. Thanks for coming. That's okay.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. As mentioned, my name is Jake Whitney. I'll be delivering the presentation this evening for the proposed physical recovery studio at 301 Pier Avenue. The request before you this evening, as stated in the agenda, is to approve a conditional use permit and precise development plan to allow a new 2,689 square foot physical recovery studio and to determine that the project is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. The subject property is situated at the intersection of Monterey Boulevard and Pier Avenue. The current site is an existing 5,292 square foot commercial building constructed in 1959 and is formerly the site of the Becker Surfboards retail shop. The site was also included in the city's housing element overlay and is identified as carrying a capacity to be redeveloped with 5 moderate income housing units. Given that the proposal before the commission this evening would extend the life of the building for commercial purposes with no residential component added, staff will ask that the Planning Commission make a finding that the remaining sites on the city's housing element inventory list are sufficient to accommodate the remaining unmet regional housing needs allocation later in the presentation. Shown above is the city zoning map to provide additional context showing the location of the property in relation to adjacent streets, zoning districts, and nearby residences. As far as the project description, the applicant is proposing to construct, as mentioned, the 2,689 square foot of tenant improvement space to accommodate the new physical recovery studio to support the needs of athletes and active individuals, Proposed services by the establishment include contrast therapy utilizing hot and cold water immersion, sauna therapy, compression therapy, and hyperbaric therapy. Proposed hours of operation are from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 8 to 6 on the weekends. The facility would have one full-time manager supported by 5 to 7 additional staff members. As far as exterior changes are concerned, there is a proposal to construct a new concrete masonry unit retaining walls on private property for the accommodation of a new electrical transformer, as well as a new trash enclosure and the creation of a code-compliant ADA space on the rooftop parking area. Due to these new rooftop additions in the parking area, as well as due to the removal of some parking stalls that are currently striped within the public right-of-way, we do expect to see the total number of parking stalls decrease from 15 spaces to 9 spaces. And then as far as landscaping is concerned, the proposal includes 3, and forgive me if I butcher the pronunciation, Akuba japonica gold plants, 23 Codeum vegetarium variegated crotons, 8 cordyline terminalis TI plants, and 40 Sansevieria triaspecta black gold snake plants, as well as 15 Sedum robiticum pork and bean plants. Above, you can see the existing site condition of the property as viewed from Pier Avenue, as well as the upper parking area discussed earlier. And then shown above are the relevant development standards that staff identified to be applicable to this particular project in accordance with the specific plan area 11 requirements pursuant to Hermosa Beach Municipal Code, section 17.58.550. The project as proposed and is currently conditioned in the draft resolution is conforming with the Hermosa Beach Municipal Code. To get a little bit more specific, as it pertains to store frontage, there is a condition of approval in the draft resolution that requires 70% transparent glazing be utilized along the view corridor on Pier Avenue that is between 3 and 8 feet in height. The code also speaks to solar orientation and specifies that all projects seeking a precise development plan design and orient their buildings to accommodate solar collection systems, as well as install cool roofing and deciduous vegetation. In compliance with this requirement, it is noted that the existing roofing membrane for the structure presently has a white cap sheet, which is consistent with the cool roof requirement and is intended to remain. Regarding the solar collection system, the applicant has provided an assessment from a licensed solar contractor detailing the cost of a solar collection system and is requesting a waiver from installing such system. The assessment states that such a system would cost approximately $56,000 utilizing 27 3.6 kilowatt photovoltaic modules installed on the roof of the building facing south, where they would fit between mechanical equipment and duct distribution while maintaining 36 inches of clearance for firewalk access. A diagram showing the layout of these potential solar panels can be found on sheet 12 of the plan sheet provided. The applicant also provided a supplemental item describing the amount of time it would take for the applicant to gain a return on investment if the Planning Commission were to require the solar system. Staff is also recommending that the Planning Commission do require the installation of the solar system out of consistency with the zoning ordinance, Plan Hermosa, as well as more specifically the conservation and sustainability element of Goal 4, Policy 4.1, which requires the city support and facilitate the installation of renewable energy projects on homes and businesses. This requirement for the solar collection system is currently added as a condition of approval, number 14 in the draft resolution. Concerning accessibility to the site, the Hermosa Beach Municipal Code requires that the applicant comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 as amended and all other practical requirements that facilitate physical accessibility for all persons, such as universal design principles. The majority of the standards are held into conformance via the Building and Safety Division. But in these requirements are also spelled out in greater detail in the staff report. It should be noted that per the municipal code, it states that the Planning Commission can, at their discretion, impose additional conditions of approval regarding accessibility if found necessary to make the entitlement findings. Regarding circulation and parking, the municipal code requires that secure bicycle parking facilities be provided in a ratio of 1 space per 7 employees or 3,000 square feet of floor area. In compliance with this requirement, the staff has required that 2 bicycle parking spaces be included as a part of the proposed project, which would be satisfied fully on private property at the southeast side of the building, which would remain clear but accessible to the pedestrian pathway. The spaces would be located under the existing canopy, protected from the rain. And they are shown and notated on the site plan, specifically sheet A 1.02 of the plan set. And this requirement for the bicycle parking is also added as a condition of approval in the draft resolution as condition number 15. As far as pedestrian amenities are concerned, the municipal code defines pedestrian amenities as any facility or feature that facilitates the or increases the desirability of walking, such as sidewalks or pedestrian ways, canopies or shade trees, outdoor spaces for pedestrians to congregate, seating, security, lighting, signage, etc. Due to spatial constraints on the property, however, and the presence of adjacent pedestrian amenities, staff did not require additional amenities to be added towards the plan set. And lastly, regarding landscaping, the municipal code describes 9 landscaping standards which were used to evaluate the applicant's landscaping proposal. The applicant has provided a plan to re-landscape the existing planned areas along the storefront. We listed the variety of different plant species earlier, which I will try not to butcher again. And then also automatic irrigation shall be used for the landscaping in conformance with the zoning ordinance. And the municipal code also does allow the Planning Commission the authority to increase any landscaping requirements or modify the requirements in conjunction with the approval of the precise development plan and the conditional use permit at their discretion. Staff is currently not recommending the incorporation of additional landscaping requirements at this time, although, as stated, deference is given to the commission in that way. That brings us to the staff analysis. Analysis from the impacts resulting from the approval of this project for the associated CUP and PDP are shown above. Expected impacts are largely transitory in nature, resulting from mostly internal modifications at the subject site. The use selected for the property is also similar to that of other service-oriented establishments within the vicinity and is not expected to create conflicts with existing businesses and residents. The plan is also consistent with Plan Hermosa, and all modifications to the parking area on the roof above are consistent with the zoning ordinance. Specifically, Hermosa Beach Municipal Code 1744015C states that no parking is required for the first 5,000 square feet of ground floor non-residential, non-office, and non-late-night alcohol establishments. And furthermore, Section 1744015B states that no additional parking is required whenever there is a change of use of an existing building for any use other than a late-night alcohol establishment. And the entire building site is 5,292 square feet, and the proposal does consist of a change of use. Therefore, it is exempt from requiring additional parking per the zoning ordinance. On the screen above, you can see the proposed exterior elevations of the property, which are to remain largely the same, aside from, I should note, you can see there's a new proposed trash enclosure located on the elevation there. On your screen above, you also will find the proposed floor plan of the business. The proposed floor plan would include 3 treatment rooms, a Normatec compression treatment station, 2 plunge pools, a large sauna, 4 changing rooms, a fitting room, a storage room, an equipment room, an office, a merchandise corner, and an accessible shower and restroom facilities, which are also proposed to be shared with the adjacent tenant, which we will discuss next, as well as a front reception area. Moving over to the findings, we've evaluated the project for conformance with the municipal code standards for conditional use permits as identified in Hermosa Beach Municipal Code Section 17.56.050, as well as the standards for precise development plans in Section 1758.030. This discussion of which is detailed further in your staff reports. And also, given that the project is located within the city's housing element overlay, the Planning Commission is also asked to make the finding that the remaining sites identified in the city's housing element are sufficient to accommodate the remaining amount of the city's regional housing needs allocation, also known as RHNA. Pursuant to the staff analysis, our city currently has a theoretical surplus of 65 units in the moderate income housing category capacity under the current housing element overlay sites designations. And the approval of this project would reduce that surplus down to 60 units of moderate income housing, given that this particular site was identified in the housing element as carrying a capacity for 5 moderate income units. The project was also evaluated for conformance with the city's general plan and was found to be consistent specifically with Goal 1, Policy 1.7 pertaining to urban form, as well as Goal 4, Policy 4.1 pertaining to renewable energy generation, as discussed earlier. This brings us to the environmental determination. In terms of compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, it was determined to qualify for a Class 3 categorical exemption pursuant to Section 15303 of CEQA for conversion of small structures. Regarding public noticing of this project, we had 910 mailers that were sent to property owners and renters within a 500 square foot radius of the subject site, as shown above, on October 31st, 2024. And we had a legal ad published in the Easy Reader on November 7th, 2024. We additionally had public noticing posters up at the site that were placed a minimum of 10 days in advance of the public hearing in accordance with the Municipal Code Section 1768.050. And lastly, this brings us to staff's recommendation. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission provide input on the proposed conditions of approval included in the draft resolution, and ultimately favor as adopting resolution number 24-21, determining that the project is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and to approve conditional use permit 24-7, as well as precise development plan 24-4, to allow the new 2,689 square foot physical recovery studio in specific plan area 11, subject to conditions. This concludes staff's presentation. We're available to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is also present in the chambers as well to answer any questions. We could kick it off.
All right, thank you, Jake. We might want to use those plant names as a field sobriety test for item 7A. All right, do my fellow commissioners have any questions of staff at this time?
I have some for later, if I could.
Okay, you may. I have a few, but Pete, do you have any? Vice Chair Hirsch?
I'm trying to decide if mine's appropriate for now or later.
Sometimes they blur a little bit.
Yeah. I do have just one question. I know that in the staff report, we said that this was closest to the use as defined as assembly hall, and just curious, not for this project, but for our updated zoning code, are we looking at the definition of assembly hall to?
We will be, as it's written now, it's not easy to discern what would fit into that category. So yes, we are interested in making that more clear, but we will have to do so carefully. The reason they are lumped together, just for references, has to do with religious uses, and that all assembly-type uses must be treated the same.
And I guess my other question about the solar that's being recommended for the building, is this just I don't know the word, is this just a goal for the upper pier precise development plan, or is this a goal for most of our commercial zones?
So this standard exists specifically within SPA Area 11. That standard isn't present in all commercial zones, but specifically for SPA 11 along Pier Avenue, it is included.
That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions as well, and some of these we may pick up later when we debate, et cetera, but specific to the solar requirement or the solar proposal, what guidance or standard is given to us by the code in terms of how we decide to include it or not? I mean, there clearly are energy efficient elements to it, or solar siting elements, et cetera, to an existing building. We've been presented with something that has potentially like a 30-year payout. Is there a standard that we have to find, or what guidance does the code give us?
Hold on, we'll specifically, Jake, if you can specifically read the code section, and then I'll elaborate on it.
Yes, so this is contained within Hermosa Beach Municipal Code Section 17.58.550H4. It states that all projects requiring a precise development plan abide by the following standards unless found by the Planning Commission to be infeasible or inapplicable due to site conditions. A is design and orientation to accommodate solar collection systems. B is install cool roofs, and C is install deciduous vegetation, overhangs, or awnings, or other features to protect south/west faces and or improvements to moderate interior temperatures. So it does
So the standard is, not to
Correct.
cut you off, the standard is infeasible or inapplicable.
Or inapplicable, and then just to correct it, there was a typo in the, once again, Associate Planner Whitney read it verbatim, there's no typo in the standard. The code section is 1738.550, not 58, but once again, not really germane to your guys' analysis.
Okay.
So if
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Sorry, if I can just expand on what Associate Planner Whitney provided. The code is broad. Staff did provide some direction to the applicant to provide an assessment as to whether the efficiency of the actual installation, how efficient would it be? Cost would be another factor. I don't believe cost alone should be the only guiding factor. So in terms of efficiency, solar installations can range in terms of how effective they are based on the location, the orientation, whether there's any shadow or shade from other buildings. We don't have those, nor was any information provided on that. So there is some assumption that it would be an efficient installation based on photovoltaic installation. So in general, just to give you context, solar installations capture about 20%. There's a range, 15 to up to 25, so we'll call it 20% of the solar energy that hits upon them, and that's generally considered inefficient. We have no information to that. However, given it's so southerly facing and there's no, obstructions, we would anticipate that an installation would be efficient. So it is within the purview of the commission to consider cost. Staff would have wanted more to support not installing.
Okay. Thank you. And then in terms of, so speak to this item. So we have two separate items that are about the same building. It would be, sort of out of Kafka to approve one and deny the other, or vice versa. So they're sort of, speak to that. I mean, there are two separate businesses that are operating there, but absent some smaller item around that, we're on some level de facto considering them as one item in terms of the building.
Yes, you're right. Likely the findings that you make for this item would carry over to the next item. As it is one building, the applicant, just for clarity as to why there's two applications on the same property, the applicants preferred to submit separately. Because there are different timelines and different entities, you will see replication in terms of the conditions of approval that are recommended in case one project does not move forward. The city is still, or the project would still be left whole. So we do see, and the scopes of each project triggered a CUP as well as the precise development plan for each of them.
Okay. And then in terms of, just to sort of restate things that were said, but I think are important, we're going to consider this. The Coastal Commission has some purview over the amount of parking. Whatever we decide here tonight can be appealed to the city council. And then as well, there's a piece around the applicability of an elevator or not, handicap parking or not. And that could be appealed to the city council if they took issue with what the building and department said. Am I?
In terms of the application processing, let me start there. So you are correct. Planning Commission's decision is subject to a appeal period. And then once the decision is finalized, whether it goes through an appeal process, city council, and then following that final decision, either the end of the appeal period or a city council action, then the item would move on to, if approved, would move on to Coastal Commission for their consideration. Coastal Commission has different standards of review, as we don't have our own local certified coastal program, so they're reviewing for accordance with the Coastal Act. And yes, certainly parking will be one of their considerations. In terms of the ADA accessibility, that is a decision rendered by the building official. I actually.
Correct, yeah, so the building official decision is one that is typically ministerial. I'm not going to speak for the entirety of the building code because there may be some funky provisions for which I'm not familiar with, but typically the inspection and sign off by the building official is one that is ministerial. So while it can be challenged legally, it's an entirely different legal standard. I won't bore you with the types of writs, traditional versus writ of administrative mandamus, but that's kind of would be. So there is no appeal. To my knowledge, there's no, if an applicant or property owner gets sign off from a building official, there's no appeal right then to the city council on that decision.
Okay. I know there's a lot of moving parts there, so I think it was important to kind of understand what's in front of us versus not. And then I'll just comment or it's a question. The hours of operation, we've had these issues before where an applicant submits for their business what they consider to be their hours of operation, which then are put into the CUP, which means that they can't expand their hours even though it might be reasonable to do so. So did we talk to the applicant about that to sort of expand beyond what I think one of the businesses had like somewhat truncated hours on the weekend, and I don't know that should be our requirement, but I just wanted to kind of tee that up or ask.
So certainly that's within the purview of the Planning Commission to adjust them.
Okay. So perhaps that's something we can ask of the applicant or tee up. I don't have any more questions of staff. Does anyone else have any questions? All right. Do any commissioners have disclosures to make, which could include site visits, conversations, or other evidence received before the meeting that is not in the staff report and which could affect the commissioner's decision on the matter. Any disclosures to make?
Site visit?
Site visit?
I did a site visit and I had phone calls with staff.
Okay. All right. Vice Chair Hirsch is indicating none. I did have a conversation with Mr. Mann Clark, who is a consultant to the property owner. I believe I'm titling that correctly. I saw him at a social event, chatted briefly, and had a follow-up conversation just about the dynamics of this process and our overall kind of planning environment. And it was, I think, helpful to both sides, but nothing that went beyond that or requires further disclosure. All right, we will now begin the public comment portion of the hearing. All questions and comments on this matter are to be directed to the commission and not to the audience. We'll start with the applicant. Is the applicant present? If you could please approach the podium to make your presentation. I know that there's a few members on the team, so if y'all want to just kind of chime in as appropriate or back each other up. But if we could start by introducing yourself, sir, and
Sure.
Sharing your thoughts.
Okay. My name is Michael Robinson. I'm the architect for the recovery project.
Okay?
We also have the architects here for the Strong project and the property owner as well. So I'm here to answer questions. And I appreciate the recommendations for approval of the use. It's a long time coming.
Yes.
So maybe, hopefully, something can be positive tonight. But I wanted to address a couple issues, and the first being the solar.
If you could speak up a little bit or maybe move the microphone
Sorry.
a little closer.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
So I want to address a couple issues. So the first being the solar. So I wrote the article that we posted on the solar, and that was in conjunction with both our electrical engineer and with Power Forward, which is a local company that works out of the 4 states in the area. And their finding is on the report. It's a $56,000 initial fee, which includes the installation, but not necessarily including the retrofit of the roof or any kind of structural reinforcement. Their assessment, it was difficult because there's no tenant that they could obtain the previous year's SCE bills, which made it a challenge for them. But so they made these assumptions based on their experience of what the electrical use would be for this tenant, and that's where they came up with this $56,000. The result was a 31-year payback, and that's based on current SCE prices, which are probably going to go up, and also 100% efficient PV system, which is not generally what happens after 31 years, right? So, so it's a small project. It's a tenant improvement project. We weren't expecting to have to do as much as we have already offered to do and are accepting to do. But this one, to me, seems like it's sort of a misuse of funds that maybe could be better spent on maybe community development, outreach, and improving their business. So we would love to get that taken out of the conditions for approval. The other thing is the handicap issue. So it's a hardship for this site in order to get access, but mostly because the Public Works Department said that we cannot build anything off-site. So everything was limited to within our property lines. There is space outside our property that actually you could install a ramp or have another type of access, but given the Public Works criteria, the only way we could accommodate was with an elevator. But in the end, it's not feasible. The investment would not be feasible for these type of tenants or this type of development. But it is there as a recommendation from staff to put in there. I mean, what I would hope that, hopefully we'll go through this exemption process and try to get this exempt as a hardship. And maybe there's ways to try to write in a special use clause that would require special consideration for handicapped people, that the employees would have to form some type of way to to gain access once an appointment is made. And that, I mean, the other possibility may be using the parking that's right in front of the building, which would be the most reasonable way cost-wise, and would help actually not just the two tenants here, but also the tenants further down the street who have our same issues, our same sloping side issues. That's all I have.
All right. If you could hang out for a second. Do any of my fellow commissioners have questions of the applicant? Commissioner Flaherty? No?
I have one question regarding the photovoltaic system. In both reports, it mentions that it would cost about $56,000. Is that $56,000 total for the building, or is that $56,000 times 2? Which
That's total. That's the
Total.
total installation. It's 25 panels on the roof that would accommodate both tenants, yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question or two. Thank you for being here. Appreciate the potential investment in our town. In terms of the solar, do the business owners or operators have any sense of what the actual electrical use would be? Or like the $2,700 a year, that was an estimate from the solar person based on the square footage of a retail space, or?
The expenditure of power was based on estimate from our engineers,
Okay.
from similar projects that they worked on. And they also have a list of the equipment and the power requirements for the equipment. So they generally had an idea how much power would be necessary.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously going to be one of our considerations. I was a little surprised because you have a roof that's, south-facing, unobstructed, and then you have a business that seems relatively energy-intensive in terms of hot and cold plunge, sauna, et cetera. So that did surprise me a little bit. I don't have any other questions at this point. Anyone else? No? All right.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Does anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? So if you're a part of the applicant group, within reason, you can come up and speak?
Yes.
Okay, well, you know better than I do. All right, we'll hear from the building owner. Then the other business is going to actually be a separate hearing item, so if you can just sit tight for that, but yeah.
If it's speaking on the same matter that will be voted on this round?
No, yeah, you can
Yeah.
speak on both. What the chair was trying to say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is we want to make sure they're separated. We don't want the other business to come up and start talking.
Yeah, however you guys want to do it. If it's very specific to the operation of the Pilates studio, then that's not relevant to this. If it's suitable to, specific to the entire building, et cetera. So if the building owner wishes to speak, let's start with you, and then we'll give you some latitude to speak as well.
Hi, I'm Don English. I represent my brothers and sisters who were lucky enough to inherit this from our father and our mother. You may know we've had the building for 60 years. Before it became Becker Surfboards, you may know there were 5 units in the building. Some of you may not have been here that long. Most of you probably have. There was a laundromat, a travel agency, if you know what those are, an insurance agency, a little boutique, and my father's insurance agency. Over time, it became one because we supported Phil and Dave and Steve and everybody at the Becker Surfboards. So we had a decision to make about a year ago when Becker Surfboards, after being bought out by 2 large conglomerates, I don't know if you knew actually the ownership, but after Dave and Phil and Steve sold out some 10 years ago, so it got passed along to consolidators of surf brands. And they picked up Becker's, and they still operate one in Malibu, and they operate one in Huntington. But they also picked up all the other brands, Roxy, and you name it, every single brand. They deemed this site to be infeasible for a successful retail operation. We had 3 years of discussions with them to try to get them to extend. We liked it. You know, everybody does. But it wasn't feasible. The minute they gave notice, we were approached by multiple other surf shops who wanted a piece, just the location and the goodwill that had been developed over, 30 years. None of them had the financial ability to provide us any kind of guarantee that we would receive the second month's rent, or even the first and last months when they signed the lease. We had one very large surf operation that wanted to come in, but they wanted to do a test run, and they didn't want to enter into long-term leases, and they wanted us to put everything up and redo the building and reposition it for them. So we instructed our brokers to seek other community-based operations. We immediately got 3 to 5 beer halls, wine tasting. They told us it would be upscale. Coffee bars, all 100 or so other ones that we all have here in Hermosa. And by the way, we still have our house on the Strand in North End. So, make a long story short, we decided to go a different direction. And we wanted to do something that would add, help, provide something that wasn't there. So as word got out that we were going to change use, so to speak, and by the way, I didn't realize it was changing use, public coming in and buying it, something from these folks would be not a whole lot different, except these guys will now be doing the wellness. In addition, we had almost 3, 4, 5 different nail salons and hair salons that were otherwise situated on Pier Avenue already, or Manhattan Avenue, or Hermosa Avenue, all want that location because of visibility, well known. And we had parking. Not one of the other places had parking. And we've maintained that parking instead of developing it for 60 years because it made the building work. And if all of you know from, if you didn't walk there, you could walk in, park quickly, go down, take care of your business, and you could go away. We decided against. One of them was 60 feet away, a nail salon. One was a spa, right, 40 feet away. They just wanted the location, right? And we decided me, on behalf of my brothers and sisters, that also wasn't going to be a long-term commitment. So we worked with the brokers and we worked with people, and the folks that you have presenting tonight is where we came up with. I think staff did something right, and that was they approved and recommended under your general plan principle number 1 that this would be accretive to the community. That's a plus. But I have learned now over the last 15, almost 18 months of no rent, brothers and sisters who live off some of this rent, that the process of going from a single user building that wasn't changing use to a multiple tenant building that was changing use has been difficult. We've had 4 turns with staff, and they've been very supportive. They've explained all the reasons why the codes have changed and why we have to do this, that, and the other. But every turn, there's been another thing, and we've all tried with them, splitting expenses, figuring out how to do it all. They've been phenomenal, phenomenal. But there have been things that do not make sense. When we had Becker turnover, and we decided to clean up the building, get rid of a couple of things that they had done. Some of the public art might have been awesome back in the 1980s. It was no longer as awesome as it is now. And then we took a look at the condition of the building. The condition of the building is positive. It is a masonry brick enforced building built in the late 1950s. We acquired it, not me, I was just barely alive, in the 60s. It is the only thing that we addressed was the roof when we turned it over. We haven't turned it over yet to them because they haven't been approved. And we looked at it and we decided to do something which I didn't realize was in your code, which is we decided to put an energy reflective silicon-based white roof on the top of the roof. And it cost us $35,000, and we did that 12 months ago. I had no idea, and I should have, that that is potentially a requirement of installing a cool roof. But we weren't building a building, we were just doing our maintenance. But we were very pleased when that happened, because when we were talking to these folks, we said, oh, by the way, we just did this for you all, and they were explaining to us how the building is half underground, and so therefore it's cool anyway, and we have an overhang in the front, and the building is awesome. The building will work. We did not find out about the solar requirement until the third turn, meaning interacting with staff, et cetera. At that time, it became obvious to me that I had completely misunderstood some of the things that have happened on Upper Pier, and that is changing the requirement for a precise development plan from in excess of 5,000 square feet to in excess of 1,500 square feet. We used to have 5 1,000 square foot tenants. We wouldn't be in front of you tonight if we still had 5 1,000 square foot tenants, because there's no requirement for tenant improvements to have solar installations. There are none. So we decided on 2 for reasons that we felt were important for 2 reasons. One, they're synergistic together. Number 2, they have the financial wherewithal to sign long-term leases with guarantees to make sure they're there for everybody. And number 3, they have good people doing work, installing good things. If you look at the plans of how they've done the inside with the ADA-compatible bathrooms that'll be shared by everyone, everything's cool, everything's great. But when we installed the roof, I didn't know I was going to have to spend $56,000 more after I spent $35,000 doing the thing. And I do not know, nobody asked me, if I put a solar over the top of the white, do I lose the effectiveness of the white roof? And if we have to change the HVAC, what do we have to do then, because we have to put HVAC? It's just, didn't know about it. If it's going to take longer, we can't do it. This is a very, very time-intensive project that has now been June, 6 months, 17 months vacant, which we thought it was going to take 6. We thought we could run in parallel with the building plans. We hope still to be able to do that. So let me just quickly address a couple of points. We want a community building. We didn't want to come in and add on top. We didn't want to come in and build this big monstrosity. We thought for the next turn, 10 or 20 years that they've committed to be here, it could be a good place for people to go to. You could walk from a large community easily, from the north end to the south end. You could walk there and be there and use their services, or you could drive there and use the parking that we have. It is becoming critical, and we are going to lose these tenants. We cannot continue to add on more and more. We are trying our best. The solar installation is extremely inefficient, and they said, doesn't really benefit us after our lease. And now we're going to write more checks just to get them in to do this when we already have adapted it. We already comply with the spirit of, in 2 of the 3 specifically, on the what do you call it? What are they called? The regulations, okay. So let me address a couple other quick points, and then I'll answer questions, and I can tell you stories or whatever you want to know about the building, or when I used to get paid 10 cents an hour to sweep the sidewalk. I'll tell you all those stories. By the way, I think that was minimum wage then, so it wasn't that bad. The elevator. This is a 1-story building. I don't know how many of you have gone in an elevator in a 1-story building before. The building has been there since 1959. We have had zero complaints of people using the public sidewalk, even though the sidewalk is at an angle of getting from the parking lot to the retail store. I know of none. I know of none of those folks that used to come in with all those public lawsuits on behalf of all those, the phantom people with the ADA people. We have never had that issue. We have never had that. We are open to suggestions. We had talked to the staff about things about using the side yard to put ramps in. They said, no, we can't do that. We talked about that, they couldn't do it, can't do that. One thing I know does not work is putting an elevator in a 1-story building. It also will destroy our square footage. It'll destroy the flow of the rotation. And we, a family, will have an empty building because these folks won't be around. Now, they haven't given us the ultimatum, but it is not feasible to cut a hole in a roof to do what we've already been able to do, but I don't know what to do.
If I could just comment briefly, we talked about earlier that the installing the elevator or not is not the purview of this group. So I
Okay.
know it's part of the broader issue, and I
It
sympathize
seems
with
to
you,
have
but
been written up, so I apologize.
there's contingencies in there if it's approved, but we don't approve up or down on the elevator. But
Well, you can suggest that maybe letting us work on other solutions, which we already have, might be the way to go, because your suggestions might carry some weight. I know you can't vote on it. I do worry that we go down this process, and a month from now, we are given the edict that we have to have it, and then you'll see a for rent sign up again on the building. So let me just sum up, and I'm happy to answer questions. We have two really good tenants. They have been stand-up and they've worked with staff. I've actually attended many of the meetings with staff to answer, support, or do whatever we have to do. We have adopted what they've asked us to do in the spirit of the ordinances. These, I believe, are hardship and legitimate hardship, and I do believe that we should have approval without them. I know your comments about the elevator. So please let us move forward if you can. I'm happy to answer questions from owner perspective, if anyone.
okay.
And I am happy to, if I have to, never mind. I'll go back to 5 1,000 square foot units and hopefully not turn everybody over all the time. These people are good people. We should get these people in.
Okay. I think, is there anyone else from the applicants group that wishes to speak that can add to what's already been shared? All right.
I'll be fast, I promise.
Okay, come on up. Well, we want to hear.
My name is Megan. I'm one of the architects as well for the Pilates studio, but I'm not going to speak to the Pilates studio. I just want to reiterate, pile on to what was said about the efficiency of the building and the notion that what you've already heard about, the really deep overhangs in the south, the geothermal support of being built into the hillside. It's an incredible, the cool roof that Donald and his family put in. It's a very efficient building. And with the solar, it's not so much that it's even inefficient in and of itself, but rather proportionally to the whole usage. It's a very low value add at a very high cost and an undue cost to the owner for an otherwise relatively small building. And I do think it's good to note, or important to note, that it is also an undue impact to the community and the neighborhood with regards to how much it will lengthen the time in construction and impact on the street and disruption to the street. This is otherwise a minor interior TI project, and with these requirements for the site redevelopment, it really takes it out into the community, impacting with, like I said, disruption and whatnot. So just something to note.
Okay,
All right. We'll let you move on.
thank you. Do my fellow commissioners have any questions of the applicant? No? Okay. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? If you're in chambers, come on up. You could sign in and tell us your name and.
Yeah, good evening, Commission. My name is Dr. Moin Sala. I've been a Hermosa Beach resident for the last 13 years. My kids are in school here. I'm a local sports medicine doctor as well, and I graduated from the Leadership Hermosa Beach class last year. So we studied about the Planning Commission, and this is my first time here, so it's been great to see you guys in action. I wanted to speak in support of this project. The Recovery Studio. I think a lot of the different modalities that this studio is going to have will be really important for everyone in this community. I'm the father of a facility. I think the location is fantastic for the local community. I plan to walk there. I plan to have many of the young athletes as well as recreational and other people go visit there as well. I think the ability to have this here in our community is going to be great, and I'm hoping that this project has your support to meet the requirements that are laid out. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, if you could fill that out, just for our record keeping. Is there anyone else in chambers that wishes to speak on this item from the public? Not the applicant group, but from the public? All right, I'm not seeing. Is there anyone online that wishes to speak on this item?
No hands are raised so far.
Okay. We'll have a dramatic pause. Has anyone yet raised their hand?
None.
Okay. Fair enough. At this point, we have a moment here. If the applicant wishes to make any further statement in rebuttal before the public comment portion is closed, knowing the only person that spoke was in favor of your project, that would be an unusual approach, but I suppose we'll allow it. Do any of my commissioners have further questions of the applicant before the public comment portion of the hearing is closed? So once we close the public comment, there's no more discourse with the applicant. So does anyone else have any questions? No? All right. At this point, I'll close the public comment portion of the hearing and bring the matter back to the commission for discussion and deliberation. I appreciate everyone's input on this. Who would like to kick it off, to use the parliamentary term? Pete?
If I look like I'm reading here, I'm reading my own notes that I wrote before, and basically what I've been doing is checking off comments that I wrote before we heard from the applicants, acknowledging, yep, that's the point I wanted to make, that's the point I wanted to make. And I guess I would start with comments that, I think from the questions that my fellow commissioners raised about let's, SB 11, what's the zoning, when did that come into effect, how does this relate, the precise. My sense of this, as I read this initially before this evening, we're talking about a project in a building that has been there, as was noted, 50-some years. It's an integral part. It's interesting that the applicants began by bemoaning the fact that it's no longer a surf shop. I think for a lot of us in town, although one of my commissioners, I won't mention which one, talked lovingly about how it used to be a laundromat, believe it or not. So we go all the way back on that. But yeah, it is, but without being facetious, it's indicative of a change that's happening in the retail landscape. And as much as we would love to see, I think all of us, or certainly myself, a local surf shop, that kind of business, those kinds of businesses, for better or worse, are disappearing for the landscape increasingly. Upper Pier, when you look, is a series of restaurants and personal service type businesses now. This is entirely consistent with that. So I'm all for it, and the doctor's recommendations or comments about its utility and potential. Again, all of those things are positive. My concern, though, and again, the things I was sort of checkmarking here, this is a tenant improvement of an existing building. The things that are incorporated from my interpretation and intention and understanding and recalling when SP 11 was created, and we talk about the requirement for precise development plans in that district, when you read the language of that, yes, you can interpret it one way, but when it talks about the orientation of the development and of the building and so forth, that's for a new building. The intent of that was to ensure that as new structures, as new buildings were created, that things like solar energy and so forth were appropriately considered. I don't think that our changing of the rules about what tripped the requirement for a precise development plan, reducing the square footage and so forth, was done with the intention that we would create the sort of barrier that's been described here to the redevelopment and reutilization of existing buildings. In fact, taken literally, it's almost like, well, gee, if I got to do a reflective roof because I'm changing tenants and the use that's associated with it, I've got to install solar. I've got to address, we've really created well, that's a good incentive to go ahead and tear it down and build a different building with a different use, and so I don't think that's our intention. God forbid somebody consolidates the either-or block into a single use, and we would try to apply these same things there. So as I look at the recommended, the ordinance or the precise development plan, the approval, the resolution for approval in front of us tonight, I think I can buy everything except that item 14 that was mentioned earlier. I don't think that that was ever the intention. As much as, yes, the general plan, and again, I'm not suggesting that I'm opposed to new construction incorporating solar, appropriate solar technology, but I'm not sure that retrofitting a building of this size because of the way in which it has been reconfigured to accommodate 2 new tenants, that the intention is that that be the threshold by which we would insist this building be retrofitted for solar and the other kinds of requirements. I think and again, it was mentioned earlier, we generally don't look at financial constraints or considerations on an individual basis. Well, it's going to cost the homeowner X amount if we insist upon that. That's generally not a requirement. And in this case, the other part of this, we're talking about a project that, as I understand, and I have no reason, that's taken 1.5 years to get to this process. That 1.5 years costs people money. And then to put, we suddenly have created a disincentive of, when people talk about Hermosa Beach as being unfriendly to business, and I'm not one of those, but here's the kind of thing that prompts that sort of rhetoric. So I'm in favor of the resolution as proposed. I would suggest, or I would be in favor of deleting that condition 14. This is an unreasonable, if not infeasible request that in this particular case, that a tenant improvement trigger that sort of a requirement. And I would make I'm looking at my own notes here. The other point I would make is the area that was formerly, it's interesting, I was on the mural project, as was my fellow commissioner. And at one point, the side of that building, we approached them about making a mural on the sort of the west-facing side. And the tenant at that time objected vigorously because after all that, it's going to be blocked by our parking anyway. As it turns out, that parking, you mean in the public encroachment area. It seems to me that when we talk about pedestrian amenities in Upper Pier Avenue, if that's a public property, the city ought to be the one that's providing a pedestrian amenity there. But I won't go down that lane. That's separate from my consideration here. So long-winded way of saying I appreciate the applicant. It sounds like an interesting business. I guess it would have to somehow incorporate some of its geriatric athletes as well as the kids at Maricosta to be of interest to me. But I would be in favor of this, but I think it's probably, I'm just going to say it's unreasonable to expect that this would be a trigger to require the solar installation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Hirsch, do you wish to weigh in?
Sure. I have a lot of the same thoughts as my colleague with regards to the solar system. I guess the way I read the goals of the municipal code is that, we can, the design and orientation of the building is to accommodate solar collection systems. I don't read that as a requirement to install solar collection systems. So I think this is a south-facing building. If the tenant or the owner decides that it's something that it makes sense from them from an operational or financial perspective, then they can do so. But it doesn't seem to me like it's appropriate for us to make that a requirement, especially the way I read the goals of the municipal code, which is accommodation, not requirement. So I agree. I think this is a great use for this building. It's been sad to see it sit vacant for 17, 18 months now, and I think that the community would benefit from the proposed use for this location. I would support the conditions as proposed with the striking of condition number 14. One thing I did want to ask to staff that the applicant mentioned was with regards to the reconfiguration of the parking lot and the ADA stall being relocated to on-site, and talking about ramps down from the parking above down to the street. I'm curious, I know that there's an asphalt patch that is adjacent to the sidewalk and the building, and what is the city's intention for that piece of land, since we're not allowing this occupant to benefit from it?
I don't immediately know what the Public Works plans are for that, but in general, I do want to just state that satisfying private requirements on private property is the requirement, and that you're not satisfying a zoning code or other obligation within the public right-of-way. So just to be clear about that.
Correct. And then just to, Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't believe this exact scenario was addressed. The idea of satisfying parking requirements in the public right-of-way was something that was addressed by council. While they haven't taken formal action, there was a general direction to staff probably 5 or 6 months ago. Once again, not in this context. I believe this was typically in the residential context, to get away from that practice. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair, any other comments?
That is it for me. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Flaherty?
I'm all over the place on this one. I do want to confirm with the staff, though, on the encroachment permit. The existing encroachment permit on this property covers mainly the east side of this property. It includes a planter box and a buttress and part of a retaining wall. Is that current?
So there is an existing encroachment permit for a planter box on the east side of the building that was issued in 1999.
And is there an encroachment for the buttress and the other encroachments up in the northeast section?
I am not aware of there being an encroachment permit for that portion of the wall.
And I just want to stipulate that I visited the site in 1970 when I did my laundry there. So I've seen that site for quite a few years, and also got my vacation tickets from the other business there. But the encroachment permit to me has a real value, and because this affects what can be done on Loma eventually. The sidewalk is adjacent on the northern property, but disconnected down to Pier Avenue. So I'm glad to see, as this process finishes, I would like to make sure that the planning department coordinates with the Public Works Department to ensure that a current encroachment permit. And I also agree that the artwork that was installed on the east wall is by Becker's at one time certainly needs to go away, and so on and so forth. And the artwork suggested by the department on the enclosures that are proposed in the parking lot, I think Steve, Pete illustrated that a mural would probably have a value on the west side eventually if the owner approves of it. even in the staff report today, the picture of the site shows cars parked all the way down to Pier Avenue. The handicap spot that was there originally and still is today was put there to try to prevent cars from parking down there. So the new parking, since you have expressed the parking that is required is being satisfied even with lesser spaces. That's the way I understood the report. And the Coastal Commission may have something to say about that going from 15 to 9, but according to city ordinance. So I certainly agree with the new layout that the plans show for the parking. But I want to illustrate, again, I'm jumping ship a little bit here. I want to illustrate that the City of Hermosa Beach Public Works Department puts in handicap spots throughout this city on public right-of-way for private use. I started that program 30 years ago, and it's still in existence. So I would suggest that there could be some opportunity to at least have that discussion with the Public Works Department. There's dozens and dozens of handicap parking spaces in front of residential properties throughout this city, as well as on streets adjacent to parks, inside parks, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, I would encourage that conversation, since we do not have the authority to approve it, to at least be a continued conversation with the Public Works Department. I think the way they move the parking inside his property is correct. I also would encourage, no matter what they do in that new exposed non-parking public right-of-way from the parking lot southbound to the sidewalk, that it could be enhanced. It could have some sort of, even not just a mural, but landscaping. Whether it's planter boxes that could be removed and added or subtracted, something that could be jointly worked on by the owner of the property and the city. It certainly could be used as a barrier for keeping future parkers from going down there. I would also encourage a sign, at least on the wall, that says no parking, because that business since 1955 has had parking there. So for 60 years, people have parked. The downside of my feelings on this property is it's going to take about 100 years to get a sidewalk in that east side. The return on the investment for this property will add another 20 to 30 years on this property. And so there's been no sidewalk there for at least 60 years. It'll be another 30 before we get more, or the encroachment gone, however that works out, to get a sidewalk in. So I'm disappointed in that. But I also agree with the other commissioners that 14 is not applied properly here, item 14. So I would be in support of removing the solar project from this program. I have a ton more stuff, but I'm good right now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Did you park in the encroachment when you were doing your laundry?
I did not.
Okay.
I walked there. I lived around the corner.
All right, appreciate it. All right, I think there's a kind of a consensus building up here. I do think, without belaboring it, to what my fellow commissioner said, that the solar requirement, I mean, in the broad context of what we have been tasked to do, and which is to, high-level kind of call balls and strikes on a city that was developed before there was zoning, before there were parking requirements. There are, buildings in town that are 100% built out, or other things. We do the best we can. I think in this instance, I would also support striking condition or finding 14 condition, because it doesn't really, meet the spirit of the law, if you will, or of the code. And I'll just speak briefly, having having reminded the applicant that we don't have any input on the elevator, I will also say I agree with what Commissioner Flaherty said, that, throughout the city, we put in handicap spaces in front of someone's home. If a handicapped person lives there, we put in handicap spaces elsewhere. We work with restaurants to take over 2 or 3 parking places to put in, for a fee, but to put in dining decks. It seems very arbitrary for a space that has, I think, 7, 8, 9 spots in front of us, very flat, very easy to not, appeal, again, above and beyond our pay grade, that something is done similar to that. I think we, on a good day, try to be reasonable people and pro-business, and hopefully we meet that standard here. I have a question back to my original comment on what are the hours of operation that are in the CUP? And do we need to, I know we have 2 different projects here. Do we need to?
The conditions of approval actually don't memorialize the hours, so I think it's okay. They're not listed as a condition of approval.
We
They-
have done that for CUPs where there's alcohol service involved, but we did not include that in this CUP.
Okay, that's fair. So there's flexibility there. I want to make sure they weren't overly constrained. All right. Are there any other comments, or does someone wish to make a motion?
I think the only other comment I would make is related to your last statement. The handicap space and the access the access to and from the front door, given the elevation here, it's another one of these things where one interpretation is essentially penalizing this building for having parking. It's all of the adjacent buildings, almost without exception, don't have parking, and obviously don't have a requirement to have, therefore, handicap access from that. If the city's intent is really to satisfy that, it probably makes sense that there be a handicap parking on the public parking area to address all those other buildings. But notwithstanding, I would move staff recommendation noting the deletion, or asking for the deletion of condition 14, stipulating that the building include the solar technology.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Vice Chair Hirsch by a second. So we have a motion, a second. Is there any further debate on this item from those of us up here? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Chair Peterson.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
All right, thank you. We appreciate your investment in our town. We hope you'll stick around for item 7C, which is going to look and sound very similar. And as a formality, do we have a staff report on this item?
We do. So Jake Whitney will provide the staff report on this item as well, and it is the same site as you noted, and it'll be on the west side of the building at 301 Pier.
This was so much fun, let's do it again.
I know.
The mentality here.
Yeah. You don't have to pronounce the names of the trees. You can put as noted.
What was one pork and bean plan? Let's go with that.
That's what you get for being promoted.
All right, good evening, planning commissioners. So we'll now do the presentation for the Pilates Studio 301 at Pier Avenue. Similar to the last project, this is a request for a conditional use permit and a precise development plan to allow a 2,386 square foot Pilates studio and to determine that the project is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Same property located at Monterey Boulevard and Pier Avenue, 5,000, nearly 5,300 square feet commercial site from 1959. home of Beckers and within the housing element overlay. As discussed, the property zoning is specific plan area 11, surrounded by dense residential uses and the commercial corridor on Pier Avenue. The applicant for the Strong Pilates Studio is proposing to provide a series of stationary bikes, as well as row former machines and light weights. The proposed hours of operation that they're aiming for is from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. on weekends. The facility anticipates approximately 14 employees, with no more than 6 employees present during their largest shift. Exterior changes is similar to the other project, as well as the construction of new CMU retaining walls to accommodate the new electrical transformer, new trash enclosure, and code-compliant ADA space. It should be worth noting that on the Strong Pilates plan set, there is a small portion of a CMU wall that's shown within the public right-of-way. That plan set was not updated in accordance with the recovery one, which will be corrected in the plan check process. Also, condition of approval number 19, which was present on the last resolution as well, prevents any new walls or footings to be constructed on or over the public right-of-way and would be enforced accordingly. So that being worth mentioning, parking would decrease, as mentioned previously, from 15 spaces to 9 spaces. And then we have those series of lovely sounding plants with pork and beans in there. As shown earlier, this is the exterior of the site as viewed from Pier Avenue, as well as the upper parking area. We've gone over the various development standards applicable to this zone, ranging from store frontage and glazing to solar orientation, accessibility and visitability, circulation and parking, pedestrian amenities, as well as landscaping. Consistent with the same layout. The one main difference with the Strong Pilates site as opposed to the recovery site is as it pertains to accessibility. Both projects would need to conform with the Americans with Disabilities Act. There is proposals to show the site with and without the mechanical lift. That is within the building department's purview. But if it were to be implemented via the building department per the building code, that would occur within the square footage of the Strong Pilates site rather than recovery. Again, outside of the commission's purview, but perhaps worth mentioning for the record. And then landscaping remains the same. As far as the analysis is concerned for the CUP and PDP, the impacts are, again, transitory in nature. Most of the work is internal. The use is that of other health and fitness related uses along the Pier Avenue corridor and downtown Hermosa. Not expecting conflicts between existing businesses or residents. The project is consistent with Plan Hermosa, and all modifications to the parking area are allowed by the zoning ordinance. We discussed the parking exemptions at length as well, which remain applicable. On this slide, you may see the exterior elevations of the property as well, which largely remain the same aside from the new trash enclosure. And then on this slide, regarding the floor plans, we do see the different floor plan layout provided here, which shows a front reception area leading to an open room layout of row former machines, along with a small nook for towel storage, a washer and dryer machine, mopping equipment, and restroom facilities, which would be shared with the adjacent tenant. The project was similarly evaluated for conformance with the Hermosa Beach Municipal Code standards for conditional use permits within Municipal Code Section 1758.050 and precise development plans in Section 1758.030, which is discussed further in your staff reports. Also consistent with the city's housing element overlay designation, this would bring the surplus of allocated sites within the housing element from 65 moderate income units to 60 units, given that in theory one application could be approved, the other not, or vice versa. The analysis was included for both. The project was also evaluated with the city's general plan and found to be consistent with Goal 1, Policy 1.7 pertaining to urban form, as well as Goal 4, Policy 4.1. And the project was further evaluated for compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act and was determined to qualify for a Class 3 categorical exemption pertaining to Section 15303 for conversion of small structures. The noticing for this project was the same, consisting of 910 mailers, which were sent to property owners and renters within a 500 square foot radius of the subject site, as shown above, on October 31st, 2024. And a legal ad was published on November 7th, 2024 in the Easy Reader. Furthermore, public noticing posters were placed on site a minimum of 10 days ahead of the public hearing notice in accordance with Municipal Code Section 1768.050. And this brings us to staff's recommendation. As was the case with the last project, staff recommends the Planning Commission to provide input on the proposed conditions of approval in the draft resolution and adopt Resolution 24-22, determining that the project's categorically exempt and approve conditional use permit 24-12 and precise development plan 24-13 for the new 2,386 square foot Pilates studio and specific plan area 11. That concludes staff's presentation. We're available to answer any questions, and the applicant remains in the chamber.
All right, thank you. Do any commissioners have questions of staff at this time?
I do.
All right, Mike?
If indeed the electrical system as proposed in both of these documents goes away, there would be also a removal of an enclosure and an electrical transformer area. Could you be prepared to then change those designs to add another parking space? That would, actually, there's a parking space illustrated in a light color where the electrical transformer would be. And thank you for changing this document here that we're looking at in this section where it shows an encroachment into the encroachment area, and that's not the correct design.
Right, so the, with the previous project, it was updated accordingly to remove any walls
Right.
within the right-of-way. This one was not, but we specified that
Perfect.
walls in the right-of-way would not be permitted.
Right. So if that, in that document on A1, we're looking at the one, A12A, even though it's the wrong final document, it illustrates the electrical enclosure. Underneath that enclosure, you can see where a potential parking space would be. If indeed both of these documents are confirmed by us not to require solar, all I'm asking you to consider adding another parking space. And then the second thing is, again, thanks for updating us that this is the wrong design we're looking at for this project. It's the other design that fits into this project.
Commissioner Flaherty, with regards to the transformer, that requirement or is that infrastructure is needed because of the change of use, not necessarily because of the solar. So unless the project goes away, I don't anticipate that going away.
Okay. Well, thank you for saying that. Anyhow, thank you for updating the design feature of this this document.
Do you have any other questions
no
of
other
staff at this time? Pete? Vice Chair?
No.
All right. Do any commissioners have any disclosures to make specific to this project?
Made a site visit?
Site visit and conversations with staff.
No.
Okay. As noted earlier, I've made a couple of site visits. I also chatted briefly with one of the project representatives, Scott Mann Clark, at a high level about the project dynamics, et cetera, for his information. So I have nothing else to disclose. We will now begin the public comment portion of the hearing. All questions and comments on this matter are to be directed to the commission, not the audience. I will ask as a formality, is the applicant present? Please approach the podium to make your presentation, noting that you don't need to speak additionally because we're all here for the previous one, but if you want to speak specific to the Pilates studio or...
No, I think, unless you have direct questions for us, I think all of the
Oh,
main things.
Chair, we should have her, yeah.
Okay, if you can, come on, I guess, speak to decline your opportunity to speak.
All right. Also, what I didn't say before, because I was looking to move quickly for you, thank you, Jake, and all of the Planning Commission staff for working really closely with us in this process and for you guys meeting us tonight. I know my colleague Mark Williams was having a lot of conversations with Jake, and we appreciate that. Unless you've got questions for us, I think it's pretty straightforward. All of the main issues we wanted to talk about, we talked about in the last round. So, yeah. I think
Okay. I think we're good for now. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this? Yes, sir.
1 minute.
Okay. I won't.
It just occurred to me that the lift or the elevator was on the Pilates side and not in the middle, so to speak. So I know it's not before you, don't have the jurisdiction, but I've heard some cogent comments and perhaps some suggestions or nudging of staff of finding other solutions. If you want to footnote whatever your approvals are, oh, and by the way, even though it's not required, we would encourage you to work with these to come up with a different solution, because I do fear as the owner, we'll lose them if we end up losing the square footage and have the cost of this elevator. So I just would like to keep them. So if you want to encourage them, and by the way, I do agree with Commissioner Hoffman, we are kind of getting punished because we have parking. If you go all up and down that corridor, no one else has parking, and we're the ones that have it, and we've benefited from it, and these tenants will too. Thank you.
Understood. All right, thank you very much, sir. Is there anyone else anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item, beginning with anyone in chambers? Is there anyone in chambers that wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none. Is there anyone online that wishes to speak on this item? Any of our Zoom participants raising their hand?
No hands raised.
Okay. Noting that, any final comments from the applicant? Hard to imagine, but I provide a beat here. No? All right. Do any of commissioners have further questions of the applicant before I close the public hearing? No? All right. I'll now close the public comment portion of this hearing and bring the matter back to the commission for discussion and deliberation. I have a premonition how it's going to go, but I'll open up. Does anyone wish to begin deliberations and or, given the flow of the meeting, make a motion?
I'll just make a little comment that when you read the staff report, at least the way it printed on my printer, this is going to be a foot Pilates studio, which I think would be terribly interesting. But in any case, not to be facetious here, I think I've said everything before. Again, in terms of it's weird in a strange way. It's like I want to see us preserve this building as it exists, and maybe it's in the different use. But anyway, so I would be in favor of staff recommendation, noting again the deletion of condition 14, which relates to the requirement for solar.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, which is to approve staff recommendation noting the deletion of number 14 specific to solar. Is there any further discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, could we have a roll call vote on this item?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Chair Peterson.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
All right, thank you.
Chair, if I might make one quick announcement about the appeal period?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the benefit of the applicant and the public, actions by the Planning Commission are subject to a 10-day appeal period that begins following the filing of the meeting minutes with the City Council. The meeting minutes for this hearing will be reviewed by City Council on January 14th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes this item. Again, we appreciate your investment in our town. Moving on to Section 8, which is staff items. 8A, Community Development Director Report, given by Planning Manager Alexis Oropeza.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I will be serving in this capacity until we have a Community Development Director. So I do have a few items I wanted to update you about. City Council last week held a public hearing and considered the Planning Commission's recommendation on the changes to the zoning ordinance relating to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. They did approve the Planning Commission's recommendation with one addition, which was to modify the height for detached accessory dwelling units. The other announcement that I wanted to make, remind the Planning Commission of, as well as the public, is that there's a civic facilities tour scheduled for this Saturday, November 23rd, from 1 to 3 p.m. It is a tour of the Civic Yard. Information can be found on the city's website as well as Instagram page. And then my final announcement is just to remind everyone that the next Planning Commission will also be on a Monday, which is the December 16th. That concludes the report for this evening.
All right. Any questions of the Development Director? Designee?
What height did the city council approve?
A single height of 20 feet, which was the original staff's proposal, with lots of debate, I will say.
And the urgency is,
Oh, and thank you. There is also an urgency ordinance. So there's two steps. Thank you for the reminder. So it was adopted by urgency ordinance to make sure that it's in effect on January 1st when state law goes into effect. The urgency ordinance did not include the height
increase.
adjustment in it. So the initial period will have just the state mandate with the relaxation for distance between habitable units, and then later in January, when the second reading occurs 30 days after that, would roll in the increase in height.
Any other questions, comments? No? All right, moving on to item 9, Planning Commission comments. I have one. I generally don't like to talk about myself, but I have no choice. Based on the vote count for city treasurer, if everyone holds serve, effective December 5th, I will be sworn in as the Hermosa Beach City Treasurer. Again, the vote hasn't been finalized, but based on publicly available information, thank you. I appreciate it. And in terms of this role vis-a-vis that one, there's no clear, hard legal line for me to vacate this role instantaneously. At the same time, common sense dictates that I would, relinquish this role sooner rather than later. So I've had some informal discussions with the city attorney and a member or two of the city council in terms of what the best transition plan would be. I think we're better up here when we have 5 of us. And so I'm willing to continue to serve until, a replacement is found, obviously given some sensitivity to the timing of the holidays, that's probably like a maybe January posting, February interviews, and then you'll have a new colleague in March. But that's just my speculation. It's the city council's bat and ball at some point. But anyway, that's my update. Does anyone else have any updates? My
would make
colleagues?
if I could, a comment. It was brought up earlier that we did receive a letter talking about the commissioner's report. My response to that would be not to do it in lieu of the commissioner, simply that those reports are really announcements. They are coming when they do to facilitate the meeting for the public, getting that out of the way for people like the applicants that are here so they don't get pushed back while those reports are made. But the comment I would make about that is historically, the Community Development Department presented a monthly report. It wasn't the director's report, but it was basically an activity report, which was really valuable to the commission. Even back then, the big issue, if we go back 20 years ago, was, gee, everybody's tearing down all the houses and all these new condos are going up in the cities. And the reality, of course, is that 4 units got torn down and 3 got built and 6 got torn down and 8 got built. And it was almost a net zero year after year. And so it was useful to kind of that issue. But now with the especially with the arena, and we had in the parking things, it would be, I think, very useful to the commission and to the public if the department were to make those reports, that kind of activity report, not the director's report, but more the data, to make that, it would do a lot, I think, to contradict some of the misconceptions and some of the perceptions in town about changes in density, changes in housing, how many, we talk so much about ADUs, the council made a change in our recommendation. How many ADUs have been built in town? How many have been planned? I think it would be really useful. How are we doing in terms of RENA? And so my suggestion, hope, is that the new director, whoever he or she might be, is that they will resume the monthly activity report, the data, not report and activities.
I agree, that was helpful. So it would list like number of building permits granted and just other sort of
Demolition permits, how many ADUs?
quantitative data. Yeah.
So if I might just add, we do keep a monthly report of activity that gets posted on the city's website, on the webpage. We can certainly do better and make information more transparent, and that is one of our goals. Whoever comes in, that is definitely an objective, to keep the metrics clear, especially as it relates to arena numbers. But there is activity reports today on the city
And I'm
website.
aware of that, but what I would think is that more eyes come to the monthly agenda, even if it's unintentional, as opposed to the individual. Mr. Higgins, I suspect, probably is intentionally looking for that data, but I think a lot of us would just, oh, gee, there it is, and it would be useful that way. Thank you.
All right. Other planning commissioner comments? Mike?
Yeah, I think I not only support what Pete says, I'd like to talk about some of the more sensitive reports that I heard Kerry and previous directors talk about every quarter or so, where they talked about like empty buildings. Is there progress going here or something like that? In fact, one of the meetings, the State of the Union meeting, she spent a good 10 minutes talking about what was ongoing, that indeed they've had conversations. I know there's some sensitivity to that type of a statement because you might be in negotiations and you don't want to say something that may not even happen. So I'd like to at least think on a quarterly basis or 6-month basis that you'll say, hey, let me give you an update on the hotel project or something like that. So not saying the monthly statement from that Pete's asking for and Dave concurs, I totally concur with that. those were bread and butter items when we sat down, 10, 20 years ago. So anyhow, if you consider that type of a statement on an irregular basis or somewhat of an updating mode type of thing. So thank you. Similar as what you just gave us tonight on what the council did, changed our actions and went back to the original 20. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Commissioner or Vice Chair Hirsch, any comments?
No comments from me.
All right, thank you all. Now on to future agenda items, Section 10, Item 10A, which is the Planning Commission tentative future agenda for December 16th, again on a Monday. I need a motion and a second on that, unless there are other questions.
Move to receive and file?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Chair Peterson.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
All right, thank you. And then 10B, this is a list of our meeting schedule for 2025. I'm going to guess that our I mean, we'll approve it. I will note that we have Tuesdays for November and December. So I don't know if we want to, is that intentional or habitual? Usually we compress it to Mondays in November, December, like tonight, because of city council, I think, meeting and space. So do we want to change that at all, or is that too heavy a topic to take up this late?
I believe that's been vetted.
Or we can just
You have
approve it?
leeway to move it. It's still early enough. The reason why it wasn't switched to a Monday or an earlier date was just due to how the holidays fall in 2025.
Okay. I like it. All right, can we get a motion to receive and file
So
this meeting
moved.
schedule? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Chair Peterson.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
All right. The next item is item 11, which is a public comment reserved if we have more than 30 minutes at the start of the meeting. We clearly don't, so at this time, or we did not, so at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone. See you in December.